Okay, yeah. So, you know what? We talk so much about our ancestors, and so many of us just want to make them proud. We want them to be proud of us. We want them to accept us. We want to know that we are carrying on their legacy and bringing justice to our family lines and blah blah blah. And we want to be healers, and we want to do the work, and we want to know that we're fulfilling our purpose. And we do feel that they have a stake um, ensuring that through their approval, through their presence, through us carrying on their memories, their legacy. But you know what? I think the reason why what has always been the goal for human beings since the beginning of time has generally been to create a better life for their children than they had, a better life for their grandchildren than they had, than their grandparents had. That's always been the goal. It's always been survival, and it has always been moving closer and closer to a place of happiness, of fulfillment, so that we could be good. And I wonder on a spiritual level if that is not because, every human understands that if you're happy and if you're good and if you're living a life with a limited amount of trauma that can probably be processed within that lifetime, you're more than likely going to be able to move on when you die. Your family is not going to be calling on you and invoking your spirit and trying to get you to help them heal and get answers and get clarity, because they're going to be okay, because they're going to be sufficient, self-sufficient, because they're going to be able to function. They're not going to be living in a state of constant trauma, cyclical trauma that keeps everybody attached to this earth and to this plane in a way that is burdensome. And so I think that part of the reason why our ancestors push for this better life, and why we carry with with ourselves this story of our ancestors fighting so hard to create a future for us that, you know, um, is worthy of the sacrifices and the work that, they had to do. I think it's so that they could be free. I think it's so that they could be free, because as beautiful as it is to have all these rituals that keep us connected to our ancestors and make sure that we understand where we come from and who we come from, I also think that there is an aspect to ancestorhood that is a bit, it's controlled by the descendants. you know the idea of keeping someone's memory alive and always talking about the past and always talking about our ancestors in a way where we have so many questions, and we want to know who they were and whether we're making them proud, and we want to understand everything about them and the in and outs of their life. A lot of the experience of ancestorhood um, is experienced through the perspective of people who are living. We don't really know what it's like to be an ancestor. We have no idea what it's like in the ancestral realm. Some of us who are really gifted in being able to see beyond these veils and see to different realms, they know, they have some information. But for the rest of us that are just generally figuring life out here, we don't have access to all of that information that can help us to really understand what's going on over there. And from my perspective, I was just sitting here at this table having an imaginary conversation with Chimamanda, and I was talking to her about how sometimes I wonder if my ancestors are hesitant about me rather than proud. Because on my mother's side, I come from quite an incredible legacy of people who have their own Google page, because they're well known, because they are change makers, they were visionaries, they were incredibly impactful in the history of South Africa and for their generations, and for all of the descendants who now live. They are what the work they've done is relevant in all of the lives of the people who now live in South Africa and all of the immigrants, South African immigrants around the world. They're important to that history. And so it is quite a legacy to descend from. And sometimes I wonder if they look at me and my life and are like, when are you going to pick up the work and continue this line of extraordinary human beings, you know, because if all their descendants just go on to live an average life, a happy life, but an average life, is that line of extraordinariness lost within the family. And what a tragic thing to lose, because what a beautiful thing to have extraordinary people who do extraordinary things. And yes, it's an extraordinary thing to be happy, but you know what I mean. Extraordinary things that change the world, you know? That's pretty cool to have in your family line. And so I was thinking about that. But I've also, last week, the first video that was put onto this channel was talking about the past, but from a perspective of trying to gather it and collect it so that we can clear it, so that we can move on. And I think that sometimes the way that we talk about our ancestors and our relationship to them, actually, you know, the power really lies with us. And sometimes I think that and I don't think this is intentional, I think this is from a place of love and a place of pain and a place of longing, of wishing that you could, you know, hold these people, know these people in real life. Comes from a place of longing and yearning and grief, because you grieve the people that you never knew when they're your family and you care for them. But I think that sometimes unintentionally, we as human beings can use that to keep spirits kind of wrapped up in our existence rather than letting them go and letting them move on from their incarnations on this planet and whatever they were doing here, and even from the position of ancestor, you know? I think that it is a beautiful thing to be able to call on your ancestors and lean on them for help and ask them for guidance. But I think that there are lines, and I think that we can maybe keep them a little bit too alive, you know? And part of being an ancestor is being dead. You're really dead. You're gone. And there is such a gift in death. You are released from the obligation to have to care about what's happening here and have to do things and do work. And, you know, as many of us as human beings descend from people who had to do a lot of work, and had to think a lot and had to care a lot and be quite present and conscious in ways that, you know, is extremely draining. Death can come as such a relief, you know, and depending on whatever the storyline was for whatever ancestor you have, you know, chances are there was something that happened during their life that, you know, they would like to move on from, but constantly invoking their spirit to help us heal and help us understand who we are and unpack slavery and unpack all of these different trauma bases for all of the many groups on this planet that have gone through something. I think it's too much. And I don't know if it's actually helpful for us. I think it's a crutch, you know, and I think it is actually much more liberating and radical to let your ancestors be and let them go. And that doesn't mean you never reference them and you don't talk about them, because, you know, a spirit is alive because a spirit has been alive, you know? So you can talk about a spirit that was here and carry them in your heart and carry them with love and lean on them in this way without, you know, really having to keep them here. And I think part of making sure that we're not keeping our ancestors trapped and kind of binding them to doing this work with us, that they did their time. They did their work when they were here. And I'm sure that some ancestors probably like to help and blah, blah, blah. But like, you know, I'm just thinking, if I was dead, I'm not quite sure I would want to be called on all the time, you know? I'm not sure if I'd want to be like invoked and like, I just feel like I would be happy to be done and ready to move on, and not necessarily move on to another incarnation, but move on to like whatever the hell else is going on in this universe of ours. I'd be interested in exploring, and I wouldn't be so interested in like particularly being whoever I was on the planet. I think I'd be more interested in being just my soul, whatever that is, you know? And it's like, do ancestors get the chance to really reintegrate with their soul if, you know, their descendants are constantly recalling them and like reviving their memory? I just feel like sometimes it's a little like, Jesus, like, can I be free already? Sometimes I wonder if that's how they feel. And to me, I would completely understand it, because that's how I'd feel. I'm so excited to have children and grandchildren one day. Fingers crossed, my children want to have kids, at least some of them. But once I'm gone from here, it's kind of like, you know, my heart will always be with you, but like, I hope I hope they let me go. I don't want to be called on to like do all this work. I'm gonna do as much healing as I possibly can in this lifetime to give my kids a clean slate the way I can, and I'm not gonna be able to get to everything. I mean, it's just impossible. It's almost like a parent's job to traumatize their kids in one way or another. So it is what it is. But like, I'm gonna do everything I can. But then once I'm gone, like, you know, let me be gone. Let's move on. Let's let it go. And I feel like that's what a lot of us need to do with our ancestors. It's like, it's time to let it go. And I think letting it go is actually just having the happy memories and letting the rest just be. Like for me, on my father's side, we're Jamaican. And like, you know, we have connections to slavery. There's slavery in Jamaica, you know, so we can just pop up there, unless there's some type of storyline that I'm missing, and maybe we did have another route to Jamaica, but if it's just a typical story, then it's through slavery. So I have descendants who experienced slavery, but like, I'm not, you know, and I went through a phase of this when I was younger, when I was a teenager, and it was all a part of just trying to understand myself and feel connected. But I would write a lot of, when I would reference my ancestors, it would be from a place of power, and usually it was about the women ancestors, the matriarchs of my ancestry. It would be from a place of empowerment, but like, you know, it would also be a little bit connected to struggle. And I feel like that's no good, you know? Why are we, you know, why is it that the most powerful way to reference your ancestors is to also speak about like the tragedy of whatever they've been through, only so that you can, you know, give context for their strength, you know? And why is it always about their strength and their power and blah, blah, blah? Like, let's just remember that they were humans and they were pretty cool, and you know, they gave life and they lived a life, and they probably did some interesting things. Maybe we don't know about it, but they did, because every human does interesting things while they're down here, whether we know about it or not. And now they're gone, and like, let's let them go. Let's let them go so that we can let go. Because it seems to be everybody's thing to like really try to not come back down here, which I get, because life is extremely hard and you make the most out of it and you try to be positive, but like, it's very hard to be alive. It's not a cakewalk. And I'm not particularly someone who's like crossing my fingers that I reincarnate when I'm done here. I would like to see what are the other options, you know? That's something I'm interested in. I'm interested in other options, because I don't know if I want to do another round. Like back to back, that's a lot. And I feel like being an ancestor is kind of like a little bit of a trick, because it's like, you get to be dead, but then now you're an ancestor. So not only are you like tied to this lifetime, but now with the way that spirituality is working out and the way it's being framed, I think it's like, now you've got to like help people manifest homes and do work and like help people figure out what's happened with our family lines. Like, I don't fucking know. Like, if my descendants ask me what happened to, like, if they're trying to ask me questions, I don't know what happened. I don't know what's happening right now. You know, I don't have any answers. I don't have answers to give. I can have my wisdom from living And I'm trying to input that in this YouTube channel so that you have something to reference so that I can go, so that I can move on. I want to move on. When I'm done here, don't call on me. And I have threatened to be a ghost in people's lives should they be annoying. If that's something I even get to do. I don't even know what we get to do. Like, I don't know what you get to do as a spirit. I don't know what are the laws? Like, what are the bounds? Like, what do you get to do? I don't know. I would like to figure that out. All I'm saying is, like, I'm not interested in, like, either, like, eternal hell or constant reincarnation or this life of as an ancestor where it's like I like appear through some type of thing and then I'm doing work and blah blah blah. I want to know. I feel like there's another option. You know, there's other ways that are more exciting, more fun, not so work based. All this work and healing based, all this healing. You know, I feel like as a soul, there's got to be something else to do. There's got to be. I feel like there's more fun awaiting in death than the options that have been shown to us as humans. And I just feel like it's a trick. So the favor I'm trying to do my ancestors is like leave them alone. I'm trying to let them be. I'm really trying to let them be. And like when I think about them, I'm trying to be happy. I'm trying to, you know, not put so much on them, not put so much pressure on them to like wonder what they're thinking about my path and like and what they wanted for me and blah blah blah. Like I want them to be able to move on if they want to move on. You know what I mean? I don't want to be the reason that they're tethered here, because that's no good. And I don't want that for myself. And I feel like that's most healing. Like if you let a soul really move on, won't all of the stuff that they were carrying, that they carried on from their parents, and but won't that all move on too? Because it's all connected to them. So I feel like that's the best thing we could all do for ourselves is just let our people go. Let them go. Let them go. Let them move on. Let it go. And part of letting it go is also not looking for someone to blame. And I think that that's something that we're having become a bigger conversation just as a global society. In all of the countries that have suffered from colonialism and from oppression under white supremacy, you know, the blame game is an endless game, and there's a lot you could pin on white countries and especially Europe, you know, and America. Like there's so much you could blame them for. It's crazy. And they do need to take accountability, but I don't think it actually helps us to point the finger, because we should just be focusing on whatever we can do to make our lives better and bring peace and happiness to our people. And I don't think that Europe and America and Canada, I don't think they're gonna help us with that task. I just can't see why they would, you know? I feel like it makes the most sense to see how we can become self-sufficient without their aid, without their help, and stop blaming and just figure out what to do. Because that's what you have to do anyways. As a human being, that's what you have to do. You can blame your parents all you want for your childhood. You can blame the person in high school. You can blame your teachers. You can blame everyone. And it could be completely valid, but it doesn't make a difference in terms of, like, how are you going to figure it out? How are you going to survive? You know, and so I feel like some countries need to just get on that type of tip where it's just like, okay, so figure it out. Like, now we know who's responsible and blah, 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 but how can you take responsibility? Because having responsibility is the best, because that means that you're empowered and you're in charge and you're not answering to somebody else or waiting for someone else to care. And I feel like that's the same thing within our own lives, you know? Taking the responsibility off of our ancestors' shoulders by not requiring them to be so present and to tell us the, you know, the secrets of our ancestry and help us heal whatever pattern. Like, look, just if you let that ancestor go, I bet you the pattern will go. I bet you'll find over time the pattern will fade, because the ancestor's gone. They've moved on. The energy's gone. It's transmuted. It's whatever now. It's just air. Let it go. Let them go. That's what's on my mind right now. And will I probably in 2 seconds be like, ancestors, what? Probably. But then I'm going to try and check myself because I really like, if this is a real thing, this is just an idea I have. But if it is true that this whole ancestor game, the power really lies with the descendants in terms of how much we keep them here, with the way that spirituality works because of colonialism and the way that spirituality isn't really what, this like all of our spiritual knowledge, so much of it has been corrupted. So the way that we talk about our ancestors and the rituals that we have, everything, you can never really know whether that's actually the way it's supposed to be done. And even like the way that we think about it, you can never really know whether that's actually whether we're having the correct thought process. And I do think that there is a system to things. There is a right way and a wrong way to do certain things when it comes to spirituality. I don't think it's just like, it doesn't matter. I think it matters. And so I think that we shouldn't dismiss the idea that perhaps some of our ideas around ancestors have been corrupted and to keep our ancestors trapped, because that keeps us trapped. That keeps our descendants trapped because now everybody's stuck and nobody gets to move on. And when I think about who really deserves to move on, I mean, would it not be the people who have suffered the most? Should they not be able to just finally let this go when they've received the kiss of death? Should they not be able to truly move on? They deserve to move on. So who would want to keep them trapped? We don't want to keep them trapped, but if we're doing these things that are constantly calling on them and placing so much power and decision making in their hands, when like, what can they really, how much can they help us? Because if the way that they speak to us, we're not even able to understand the signs because they're speaking in a language that we don't understand because we're not dead. We don't know. And we understand things from a soul level and a spiritual level, but like, to what extent? Because these veils are thick, they're thick. This realm, this 3D realm, it's quite real, and the realm of the ancestors, the realm of death, it's, it's close, but it's not that close. And this real life, this incarnation, it's real. And so it's hard to penetrate and it's hard to get messages across. And so asking them for their help, and then, like, can you even understand the language? Is there even a point? What if the message that they're sending is, girl, I don't know the answer? I feel like that would be my answer half the time. I don't know. Especially for like the ancestors, where it's like we're calling on ancestors of recent past. They're also victims of colonial. How do we know they know the answers? You know what I mean? Like all the shit had already been disrupted at that point. And they're working from the incarnation that they had on this planet. They're not gonna, they have we even given them the chance to integrate have they gotten the chance to integrate into their soul? And maybe their soul knows something, but like, are they speaking from that place or are they speaking from their incarnating place? Because then it's like, well, they don't know, they don't fucking know. And I'm saying that like I'm on their side. I'm like, do they know? Let's let them be. Maybe they can go find out when they go integrate and move on. And then maybe once they go integrate and move on, maybe they can send a message. Who knows? I don't know. I'm just saying. And I'm just thinking, on a controversy tip, not a controversy tip, conspiracy tip, who would want to keep ancestors here stuck? Maybe people who can't move on. Maybe people who it's going to be a lot of work to move on from this planet. People who are really tethered to this plane because they have a bucket load of work to do because they did a whole bucket load of bullshit while they were here. It's probably that. Like, they're stuck. Maybe they want the rest of us to be stuck. No thanks. No thanks. And I want to have kids, so I definitely want to have a legacy on this planet. I love the Earth. I love Earth. I love this planet. I love people. I love human beings. I'm not one of those people who's like, I hate people. I love people. I love people. I love being a human. I love being a woman. I love the fact that I can have children. I want to have children. I want to do all the things. I love it. But, beyond that, when it's time to go, I'm ready to go. Peace out. I'm not trying to come back. And that's not because like I'm like, I want to go to heaven, but like low key, and not, it's not about Christianity. It's just about, I'm done. You know, once the work is done, I'm done. Peace out. I'm done. And I feel like our ancestors, they did it. They were born, they lived a life, and they died. Like, let them go. They did it. You know? Stop asking them for help. No, I'm joking. You could definitely ask your ancestors for help. I'm just talking. I'm completely just talking. And I'm probably just talking to myself and then just voicing ideas. But I do think there's a truth there. And this is for unnecessary stuff. Like, stop asking. No, you know what? Let me be quiet because I have no, I'm just talking. I'm just talking. But I do think there is something to what I'm saying. And especially around the idea of who would want to keep the ancestors stuck. So that, and also because it's like, I bet the healing process is a little easier if certain other ancestors that exist on this planet, have access to our ancestors so that they can, figure out what happened and apologize and all this BS. And it's like, no, girl, you're gonna have to do that work on your own. Find some other magical way. My ancestors don't have time to talk to you. I'm thinking out loud. Because I'm just like, what are the ways that we can really set ourselves free? And I feel like it's letting the ancestors be. Let them be. You can have a picture, you can have an altar, you can talk to them and be happy and blah, blah, blah. But beyond that, we don't need to ask them to do any kind of work. We need to let them be. I feel like we need to let them be. And that also means not asking them to do work around like telling us that we're worthy. It's like you need to tell yourself that. You need to figure out how to give that to yourself. Because if they tell you, are you even going to listen? You know what I mean? Like, you need to get it for yourself. That's what life is. We have to figure it out. That's what life is. It's always been that way. Nothing's changed. So I feel like it's a trap in this new spirituality, and even it being painted as like traditional spirituality and ancient spirituality. I'm like, is this the ancient spirituality? Were they doing this with the ancestors? I don't feel like they were. I feel like it was different. Like, I don't feel like the ancestors are being called on in this way. I don't feel like it. I don't think they're being referenced so heavily and like being used to manifest homes and healing generations. It's just like, no, I feel like it's like when they're gone, and you bury them correctly so that they can move on. That's what the thing was always about, burying them correctly so they could leave, so they weren't trapped. That's why it's such a horrible thing to do anything to a burial ground, because you're disturbing those spirits and they're trying to move on. And who knows how long it takes to move on. So you really don't want to disrupt that process. It could be immediate, or maybe it takes a while. I mean, I imagine if you got to collect all your shit, it might take a while. So it's like doing anything to a burial ground. That's why it's so disrespectful. Or like not being able to find like your people's bodies, or not know where your people were left. That's why it's so traumatizing, because it's like, you're concerned for their spirit. And I completely understand that. And that is the part of ancestral legacy that I'm concerned. The thing that I'm passionate about right now is just making sure that our ancestors are able to move on if they want to. Whatever move on sounds like, whatever move on is for them. I just want to make sure they're able to. I want to make sure that there's nothing we're doing on this planet that is keeping them trapped, because it's like, enough is enough. And especially because if we're able to learn how to make sure that our ancestors are moving on when they die and are not staying stuck here and not staying tethered here, that also ensures that we're able to do that for ourselves, which I think is a game changer. Because right now, humans, like for most of us who are now living in this modern world, we're like damn near clueless about what's going on in the spirit realm. Like, we have ideas and we have connections to culture and religions and spirituality, but so much has been corrupted. And I don't know, man. I don't know. So I want to figure that out, and I want to make sure that I'm not doing anything to keep my ancestors attached here. And anything I can do to let them go, I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try my best to do that because I think they deserve it. And I want that for myself too. So, it's a selfish cause, and it's also it's for them. It's for all of us. All of us, when we're gone, we just want to be able to be done. I don't think that's too much to ask. So those are my thoughts. Yeah. Okay. Bye.